Of course, it's common at a ballpark, like the hot dog and a beer. But the baseball cap has become something else. Yeah, you can show your support of your favorite baseball team, but now everyone has one. So how'd that even happen? Let's go now to Michael Clair, a writer over at MLB.com. That's Major League Baseball's official website. Michael, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I loved your look, a really beautiful and intricate look at the history of the baseball cap. Let's start off from the beginning. Did humanity dodge a bullet? Was there a chance we'd all be wearing straw hats right now?
Yes, and yeah, I would say we definitely dodged a bullet because I was one of those strange high school kids who chose to wear like a straw hat every day. And looking back at those photos, I'm very glad that's not what everyone has. But yeah, the very first team that the New York Knickerbockers, they were the first official amateur team. They came out with, this is our uniform, and it was for nothing more than to identify yourself as essentially part of this in-group. The uniform looks a little like a Mumford and Sons band member. They're wearing, little, bloomer pants and, a little shirt. But yeah, the hat the very first baseball hat was a 360-degree brimmed chip straw hat. And I can't imagine that would work very well now for running the bases, for making catches, for swinging the bat. So, history definitely went in the right direction on that one.
And when did it start, and how did it start? How did it start to go towards the baseball cap?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things, right? So the very first uniform did nothing more than just to say, like, you're part of this team. But soon more teams exist, and so you need something that actually identifies them. Well, what's the best way to do that? It's usually through something, colors, the blue team versus the red team. So obviously straw hats, that wasn't really their thing. I think it's also, in terms of its use, that 360 degrees, it's great for keeping, the sun off your neck, but not great for batting, not great for running. And I think it's also price. The very first caps were made out of merino wool. And if you look at some of these really early advertisements, they're not saying, beautiful heritage pieces. They're saying these are made with the cheapest wool, the cheapest, merino fabric, the cheapest flannel, because they were trying to get the price point down as low as possible for as many teams. And then I think it's a fashion thing. There were a variety of hat styles in the 1800s and even the early 1900s. There doesn't become sort of like, this is what a baseball cap is until much later. But they all start moving in this cap direction and away from, like a farmer's straw hat.
You look at historical photos, you look at the stands, you don't see many baseball caps, but then there's something that happens where it just takes off and it ends up in everyone's wardrobe and it becomes this fashion accessory. Michael, let's go down that path. At what point does the baseball cap go from utility on a baseball field to something everyone has?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The theory kind of is, you look at early photos of people in stands, they're in suits, they're in ties, they're in, fedoras and all that the fan market doesn't even exist until there's color television. And now fans are watching their team at home and they're saying, like, I want to wear what they're wearing. And so there's, this is 60s, early 70s, and the hat market is not like it is today. There's no lids. There wasn't even, Foot Locker, much less, stores that just sold baseball caps. But, if you went to the game, you could buy, a cheap little souvenir hat. But it's color TV that starts to get people into it. And really the watershed moment is 1981. New Era puts a mail-in order form to buy their hats, because everything they did was made to order and just for baseball teams at that time. But every now and then they would get a phone call from someone who said, "Hey, I'm a huge Red Sox fan. Can I buy one of your caps?" So they put in a mail order form in Sporting News. I think they assumed they'd maybe sell a couple dozen. And their owner at the time goes to pick up the mail. He grabs his usual bag, and they tell him that there are 7 more bags in the back of order forms. And that is a huge problem because they did not have the inventory, nor did they have the way to produce those caps quickly. So it's literally this moment when New Era thinks, hey, why don't we sell a few more hats? This demand that then they have to start figuring out how to make those hats. After that, it takes off because pop culture buys in. We have Magnum PI with, Tom Selleck wearing the Tigers hat. We have Chuck D of Public Enemy wearing a Pirates hat. We have Eazy-E of NWA in a White Sox hat. And that's huge because he's not from Chicago. For NWA, it's fully a fashion thing. And that's really the moment that it becomes something entirely else because you're not representing your love of a team. You're not even necessarily representing your love of where you're from. Mm-hmm. You are wearing the hat entirely because it is a fashion statement.
We're with Michael Clair. He's a writer at MLB.com, Major League Baseball's website. They've just taken a look at the history, the long, strange, glorious history of the baseball cap. And Michael, I'm glad you've brought up the pop culture aspect. One of the reasons I reached out to get you on this program is as I'm reading your wonderful story, what do I see on the pop culture front in your piece is a photo of the artist Fat Joe wearing his Montreal Expos cap. And let's bring the Expos into this conversation because there's something, the Montreal Expos cap is still big sales-wise, pop culture-wise, not just in Montreal, everywhere. Talk about that. Talk about how these logos and these caps can be so resilient.
Yeah, the Expos hat is a perfect example because the Expos haven't been around. And obviously, if you're a baseball fan and you wear it, sometimes you're just saying, I kind of love it's kind of a hipster hat in some ways. But also that style, when they created it, that logo that you get the E, the L, the B, it's a gorgeous hat, the colors they use. And this didn't make it into the story, but there is a full story you can kind of go down. But the hat Fat Joe's wearing is the solid royal blue Expos hat, but the one that you see so often is the white, blue, red cap that has all the different segmented panels, mm-hmm. And that was a huge issue for New Era because the Expos made that hat, and this wasn't, they then had to put different colored panels of fabric, three different colors of fabric into their process, which obviously is harder to do, more time consuming. And part of that, that hat stands out. It doesn't look like any other hat that's ever been worn in the major leagues. So you've got great design and you've got, something that is really kind of quirky and different. And I think you combine those two things and you have a hat that has lived on, decades after the team has.
It's unbelievable, Michael. If you take a walk through the streets of Montreal, you'll see more Expos caps than ever. Michael, great story. Really enjoyed reading it, and thank you so much for taking the time for our listeners this morning.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm always down to talk about baseball hats.
That's Michael Clair. He's a writer at MLB.com.